Hey guys, Mike Healy here again, and I've got another morning gym rant for you. And this is obviously another impromptu thing that I like to bring to you. It's kind of, the light's kind of harsh on my face. I got a black shirt on, I'm soaking wet. If I just look really sweaty, it's because I got my workout done already today, and it was fantastic, so it was fun. And I feel good about it. But hey, I wanted to... thing I just posted is people follow leadership and vision, and I just had a thought in my mind that I wanted to share with you guys, because obviously we're all going into the next next decade of 2020, which is kind of hard to believe, but it is what it is. And I thought I could give you a couple tips real quick on some things that I've done myself and what I plan on doing, and so on. So thanks guys for joining me. I see a bunch of you on here. If you want to tag anybody in this too, feel free to do that. But the one thing that, so I wanted to kind of go back and way back in time on myself and kind of bring you up to speed and kind of give you some marching orders for 2020 if you're interested. So I remember years and years ago when I was actually pre 90s, like in the 80s, I was in high school, right? And when I first got to when I was young, like a lot of guys, my age at that time, we were always looking up to, the top athletes and stuff like that. And I was a really, really small, scrawny kid. I used to get picked on a lot. I couldn't really fight back. I was like 140 pounds, soaking wet with my football pads on my sophomore year. And I remember just getting annihilated out on the field. But there were some people in my grade that were really good leaders. They were good athletes, and I just really wanted to strive to be like those guys, right? So it kind of started, I guess, back then. And then back basically by my junior year, I started actually, hitting maturity to the point that I was putting on some muscle and getting a little bigger, a little stockier, and I could actually push back now. Instead of just getting pushed around, I could actually push back, which led me into a bouncing career later on. Wasn't intentional. I was supposed to go into the military. I always wanted to do the special forces, but I got a medical discharge my senior year because I broke my leg. So longer story shorter, hopefully. But I remember in the bar business, what was crazy about being in the bar business is, it was a job. As a bouncer, you had to have a job to protect the patrons, right? That's what my job was. And a lot of times it did look like Roadhouse. That's not that far off from being accurate. Was shot at a few times, was nearly stabbed a few times. Picked up, luckily I had enough skills from, my background, wrestling, martial arts, things like that I could defend myself. But I remember when I was a bouncer back there, I was actually a bouncer, head of security down at Ohio State campus for quite some time. And what was cool is they put me as head of security at the club I was working at, and there was like 20 other clubs or 18 other clubs that were under kind of the umbrella of that network. And then what was awesome was from the leadership stuff, there's a point to all this bouncing stuff. From the leadership point stuff, thinking back to the bar days, I remember that it could a lot of times it could potentially be a life and death situation. I'm not saying that's where you at right now, but it could have been, a life and death situation, that if something really broke out in these clubs that had, 200, 500,000 people in them, that it could go south really fast. You could get really, really injured, potentially killed. So I, being in charge of, the security there, my job was to be the leader of the rest of the security, right? And it was a scary thing, because a lot of times in leadership, especially in a position of where you have to really step up, a lot of times people can't see you scared. Like, you have to look way, bigger, faster, stronger than everybody else. But, this is me admittedly saying this, that even though I was benching 400 back then, squatting 5, that kind of thing, and could, pretty much do what I needed to do to survive, it was still a scary situation, when you're bouncing. But the thing that was, to me, that I've learned now from way back then, and I mean, it's kind of a dumb analogy, but it's kind of fun to talk about sometimes, is that when you step up as a leader, you'll be shocked at how many people follow you and have your back because you exude leadership. Okay, that's kind of the whole point. I'm trying to hold my phone. One of these days I'm gonna be smart enough to get a phone holder thingy, whatever those are called, phone holder thingy. But I remember a lot of times when a new guy, so when I'm down at staff here bouncing at the club, when a new kid would show up, like a new bouncer would come in, right? A new kid that got a job there with me. I was, since I was in charge, I would go sit down with him. I have a little quick talk. And basically I would say, listen, here's the deal. If don't ever think that you've got to jump into any situation. You never have to fight. You never have to do anything. All I'm asking you to do is just keep an eye on my back. Okay. And if a situation you think you can't handle, you come get me, right? You have to remember, people look up to leadership, right? So you have to posture yourself as a leader. So when I was in the club, I would tell these guys, you never have to fight. You never have to do what I do. You just have to sit back, but just keep an eye on, the back. But by taking that position, it was amazing how many of these guys that really weren't that big, they didn't have any real fight, background of any kind. A lot of them didn't have wrestling backgrounds, fighting backgrounds, would jump right in when something went south. Okay. And there was plenty of times where, there'd be you'd have like a fraternity come in. Like I worked in a club. What was funny is I worked in a club on campus that played nothing but techno music, like The Cure, The Smiths, things like that, Depeche Mode. And, everybody there in that crowd was usually pretty cool. But then I would get all these crazy frat guys that would come in that were kind of preppy. So I've got what we called them ghoulies back then. I think a lot of times you call them goth these days, but the goth people were usually the coolest people. And we'd get tons of them down here. But then you would get people that had been drinking all afternoon and they'd come down. So we'd have fights sometimes that would have 30, 40 people involved in it. And we usually ran a staff of probably about, 15 guys, right? But, and so it would go south. But anyhow, my leadership thing, let me stay on point here. But a lot of times, what was really cool is so when a fight would break out, I, as the leader and the guy that was head of security, was pretty much designated to be the first one into the pit, right? The mix of it. And I had to do it with complete, total abandonment so that anybody I knew was on my side to protect me was going to be there that had my back. So I really had to jump for it. What was funny is if there was a fight that broke out, the DJ would yell, because my nickname was Guns. And actually this club story is where I got the nickname Guns, was from that club. But they would say guns to the dance floor, or guns to the door, or guns to the bar, or guns to the DJ booth. Wherever the fight broke out, they would say that. And that was the signal to go there. And how I got the nickname Guns was I got big arms, and I didn't have a staff shirt the first day I worked, and I had a Motorhead shirt with the sleeves cut off, and I had real big arms because I'm short, and they look bigger than a lot of times they really are. And the one manager was yelling up at me, and he couldn't remember my name. His name was Al Dowds, by the way, in case somebody ever runs into him. And he yelled up, he goes, "Hey, you with the big guns." And another manager next to him started laughing, and it stuck. And my wife, Stacy, still to this day, that's how she was introduced to me, never calls me Mike. She always calls me Guns. So if you ever hear her say Guns, I've got to try to keep her to not yell my name out in airports. That has not worked out a couple times when something, whatever. And she'd go, "Hey, she'd go, Guns, bring this." And you'd see all security guys like perk up, and I'm like, "Stace, call me Mike in the airport." Anyhow, but back to my leadership thing. I rabbit trailed on you, squirrel. But in the bar business, and it's just like anything you have in life, is people follow leadership and vision. Okay. So I would create, or you as a leader have to create, whether it's for your family, for your organization, for your job, for your community, whatever it is, your church group, whatever, you have to create the vision. You have to create the vision of what people can expect. Okay. That's kind of a big point. Like when I'm doing my businesses, like I'm always painting vision. The only thing I usually talk about is vision, thinking big. You look at your future. Can you imagine? What if? All these things. Because if you paint the vision, then it gets into somebody's head and it starts to trickle down into their heart. But when you become the leader painting that vision and you start to execute what that vision was, then people begin to really, really follow you. Okay, so that's kind of the important point here. So like in the bar business, everybody knew that our club, it was called Purity. If anybody's watching this that's in my age group might remember it. So, and I used to have a mohawk. I had my ears pierced. I had 3 ear piercings on this side. I wore army boots, camo pants, the whole 9 yards. I was way whacked. And I used to shave the side of my head with a razor to the skin. That's what I looked at. So I was totally crazy. Like, you wouldn't recognize me nowadays compared to what I was then. But what it was is, I, as the leader in the club, had to paint the vision that if they were there with me, that we were never going to lose. We were never going to lose a fight. It was never going to be overwhelming to the point that we got hurt. And in 99.9% of the time, that was the case. We never, our group of guys that I had, and I mean, I had some, and what was cool is, because of that vision, and they knew that our staff had some of the best guys on the campus, we attracted some of the really high level guys that would work at our club and bounce. Like, I had a couple guys that were, like, one guy was like, he was an Asian guy from Okinawa, Japan. He was like 220, just a black belt and everything like that. And I had other guys that were power lifters. I had some football players. So it's pretty cool. And a lot of times too, if a club, one of the other clubs, had an issue or a problem, they would literally call us, call our club, and we would have to come down with our staff, because some of these clubs could hold 2,000-3,000 people, and when you got a staff of maybe 20-30 guys, you can't handle something that big if it gets really goes south. And a lot of times you get these frat parties that come in, and they'd have 50 to 100 of their frats in there, and they're obviously thinking they're going to do it. So when you got a group of people, different groups and cultures that have their own way of doing things, you have to, as a leader, you have to create a bigger vision and a bigger culture, in my opinion, to win the battle, basically, I guess you could say. I don't know where the bar whole thing came. This has not, like, I did not plan on giving you guys a whole bar background, but anyhow, it is what it is. I mean, I learned a lot of these things back then. And there were times where, there wasn't a time that I didn't have an, adrenaline rush to the point that it was scary, and so on. But, you knew, the thing is when you know that you've got a team of people that you've painted a vision for, that are willing to follow you into the fire, it's a completely different thing. That's why there's gangs, and that's where the thing, I'm not going into that part of it, but it was in all those years of being in the bar business, I mean, I really learned a lot about leadership and overcoming adversity and what can go south and what happens. Because there were a few times that we were outnumbered. I mean, I'm probably the worst fight I ever had to endure was, it was Michigan-Ohio State weekend, home at Ohio State, and it was a night game. So everybody'd been drinking since kegs and eggs at 6 o'clock in the morning, and most of my staff were drunk from the night before. So half of them didn't show up, and I was positioned at a club that only had 2 other guys besides myself. And I mean, I got the one night, I think I had to throw out like 15 guys, not all at the same time, but throughout the night. And luckily these guys were there to help and protect, and they had the vision, and people would come in, and the police a lot of times would have to back us up and stuff like that. But it was just, it was a crazy time in my life. But then after I got out of, so let me move on out of the bar business. I think I kept a lot of you guys to watch this thing because I'm talking about these crazy bar stories. Oh, and I got hundreds of them. I could talk for days and days on bar stories. But from a leadership and vision standpoint, from the bar business, it taught me something. I obviously, before getting into the bar business, when I said I wanted to go into the military, I always thought I was going to be in special forces. I followed all these guys and stuff like that. So if you ever see anybody in the military, they totally understand it. They get it at the higher level that you can't experience. That's why it's like, once they're in the military and they meet they have these bonds, because that ain't even close to the bar business. I mean, give me I think I'm cool sometimes because I got bar stories, but when you're stepping into a line of fire, you better have leadership and vision on your side of who you want to, what you're going to go do in battle. Okay. So let me dial it down back into kind of a business standpoint, and then I'm going to be done. Dave Civey, you can tell, Civey, you didn't catch this. I see you on here. I was just relaying a bunch of bar stories. Dave Civey used to bartend at one of the ones, and he could tell you more stories than you'd ever want to hear. But from a leadership and business standpoint, from people follow vision, leadership and vision, is once I started learning all these things and then we're able to apply them in business, a lot of times people will go above and beyond the thing that they thought they were capable of doing. And when you project a big enough vision, you project a big enough future, you project what's in it for them, what ifs, can you imagine, using that phraseology to build something bigger than they are, most people will get out of a comfort zone faster and bigger than they had ever been before. They will do things that they normally wouldn't do under normal circumstances. Okay. That's kind of the whole point of what I'm talking about here. So all that being said, leading into 2020, the one thing that, you're going to see from me, and I'm already doing this in my organization and my team and my, company that I'm in, is I'm not one of those personalities, because I was never handed anything. I didn't come from a super wealthy family. Parents took care of me, obviously. But I didn't have any business background before. I never went to college. I don't have I don't have a college degree or anything. And these were all hard knocks things I learned. But the people I respected the most my entire life were people who painted a big vision and were real leaders when it got tough. And I never respected those people that, were the kind of mentality people that everybody gets a trophy. Those people are just a waste. They are absolute waste of people. Everybody should get a trophy. If you can't, why do they keep score? Because you have to compete. I think everybody's created with the innate desire to win. Okay. I hate losing. I hate losing. This is a Moneyball quote. I hate losing more than I even like to win. And there's a difference. Okay. Because if you think about it, this is, when you're going into 2020, your family's watching you, your friends are watching you, your business people, or, coworkers are watching you. You need to make sure that you're painting the vision, that you're designating yourself as a leader. Okay. You may have to follow temporarily. Okay. You may have to follow temporarily, but the gold and the big money and the big reward is in leadership. Okay. And I had to learn that. I had to start changing the way I thought. I had to believe that I was capable of leading. If you think about it, me coming from being this little scrawny kid way back when I was younger and getting just kicked around and beat, to being head of security down on campus and some other clubs, to where I've been successful in business. A lot of it's from learning these principles. And now I've learned all these other things, that you have to start listening to the right things, following the right people. Okay. Remember, your circle of influence is going to be pretty, you're going to end up being like your circle of influence. Okay. If you don't want to be like your 4 or 5 best friends and what they're doing or where they are going, you may want to disassociate yourself with those people. There are so many people that waste time with people that are dragging them down versus lifting them up. And I had to learn that. There was a lot of very good people and friends that I hung out with, but I knew deep down in me that they were not going to be the people that I needed to look up to, follow, or associate with, because they didn't have any vision. They weren't going anywhere, and so on. I'm not saying you don't love everybody and associate with people, but I've learned that my time is more valuable than to give it away to people that are going to be, that are going to suck it away. Okay. If you're associating with people that when they walk into the room, the attitude drops, boot them. If you've got friends that when they walk into the room, people are excited to see them, then you might be on the right path. Okay. Other than that, you need to just, get rid of some of these people. But anyhow, all that being said, I know I rambled on here. If you're just getting on, make sure you watch the first part of this. After I'm done, it'll kick back on in the replay, because I was talking about leadership and a lot of bar stories in here. Maybe I'll come on and share more bar stories with you and how they applied to me later on in life. But anyhow, it's been great talking to you. 2020 is going to be your year. If you choose to apply yourself, go out there, kick butt, take names. I plan on it. Hopefully you do too. Remember, associate with the right people. But don't forget, people follow leadership and vision. Be a leader and paint a big enough vision that people want to follow it. So thanks again, guys, for being on here. I'll see you.